Right, again, good afternoon and welcome to our seminar at PPSK. Today we are honored to have two distinguished speakers to talk on scoping review paper. But first of all, before we start the session, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Hairul Anwar Hashim, Deputy Dean for Research, Innovation and Industry Community Engagement from PPSK to give the welcoming remarks. Prof, please.
Start ya?
Yes. Yeah. Prof, you
Oh,
can
okay,
start now.
sorry. Uh, uh, okay, okay. Terima kasih Prof. Dr. Ling Ling dan terima kasihlah kepada
Prof. Hairul, we lost you.
saya tak dengar. Hello, dengar ke tak?
Dengar dah.
Okay. What I was saying, saya mengucapkan setinggi-tinggi penghargaan lah atas kesudian Prof. Dr. Saiful dan Dr. Kamran untuk berkongsi pengetahuan dan juga pengalaman dalam membuat scoping review ni lah. Jadi saya harap program-program yang kita anjurkan macam ni akan memberi manfaat lah, terutama kepada staf-staf dan pelajar-pelajar Pusat Pengajian Sains Kesihatan dan juga semua peserta yang join pada petang inilah. Jadi itu sajalah daripada saya. Saya nak menyambut Prof. Dr. Saiful dan Dr. Kamran. Ucapkan terima kasih dan juga saya harap sesi ini akan beri manfaat kepada semualah. So terima kasih saya kepada Prof. Dr. Ling Ling untuk meneruskan kita punya agenda seminar. Terima kasih.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Dr. Hairul. All right, so for today, we are going to have two speakers. All right, so the first speaker will be Dr. Kamran Sattar, and this will follow by the second speaker from Associate Professor Dr. Muhamad Saiful. And after that, we will follow with the Q&A session. All right, so before Dr. Kamran start his talk, I would like to introduce to you who is Dr. Kamran Sattar. Okay, so Dr. Kamran Sattar is a passionate medical educator who has successfully undertaken post-graduation in academic medicine. He is one of the few from Pakistan who accomplished a master's in medical education from University of Dundee, UK. So as a successful academic, he has published a number of scholarly publications, including scoping reviews in high impact index journals, and he has made several presentations at prestigious institutions. So medical professionalism, student well-being, curriculum, and assessment remain his main areas of interest. And currently, he is designated as a curriculum specialist at King Saud University, Saudi Arabia. And he also serves the scientific community through his services as the academic editor of PROS One Journal and Frontiers in Medicine Journal. He received an award as a Fellow of the Academy of Medical Educators, London, and he is currently pursuing his PhD and MAd under Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari Yusoff. So, Dr. Kamran Sattar, so the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for this very generous introduction. And let's begin. I hope we all can hear me properly and see the slides?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Yeah. Just a minute. Let me get familiarized with setup here so that I can also see my slides. Yeah. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. I myself am Dr. Kamran, currently a PhD candidate at PPSK, Department of Medical Education, USM, and also serving as a medical educationist and a curriculum development specialist at College of Medicine, King's University, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Today, I welcome you all and say good morning and good afternoon, as I believe we are in two different time zones. As we are in two different time zones, that's why I have to say good morning and good afternoon. I have to thank the organizer, staff of PPSK, and my supervisor, Associate Professor Dr. Saiful Bahari, for organizing this wonderful event. Actually, I feel privileged, and it's an honor for me to share the panel with Associate Professor Dr. Saiful Bahari. And I would like to request you to accept my heartfelt gratitude for this opportunity. I would also like to take opportunity to thank my co-supervisors, Dr. Muhammad Zaravi, Dr. Azhar Yassin, and Dr. Wan Noor Arfin. At the same time, I would also like to take opportunity to thank all the participants who have taken time from their busy schedules and busy studies and come along. So basically, this presentation shall let you know how to embark on and complete a scoping review. Today, we are going to talk about the scoping review. The scoping reviews are a useful tool in ever increasing arsenal of evidence synthesis. Here in today's presentation, we will discuss as how to make the perfect scoping review step by step. I think I have lost the connection.
No, it's okay. We are still with you.
I got a message that I have been out of meeting, so I think I lost my presentation from here. Let me get back into it. And I cannot see on screen my own presentation. I think I have to start again. It's okay now? Yeah. So what basically is a scoping review? So scoping reviews are the review articles. And as you already know that review articles are the reviews of articles as the name suggests. That means it is the study of studies. It means we do not do a study of patients or subjects. Rather, we collect data and we synthesize the knowledge which is available in that data. So there are many kinds of reviews, and here today we are only focusing on scoping reviews. The scoping reviews, as the name suggests, is the scoping search. It means you are trying to see how much data on a particular topic is already available, what has been done, how many kinds of studies are available, and at the same time, how many study methods have been employed in the literature. Here we can see three questions: what, how, and why. I strongly believe these three questions are the best friend of any researcher. And knowing the answer to these three questions, which are what, how, and why, you are more likely to be engaged, work in a right direction, and have a greater understanding of your goals. We believe at the end of today's session, the participants will be able to describe what is a scoping review, why to do a scoping review, and what to do if you want to do a scoping review. There are various types of knowledge synthesis available across the literature, but we do not need to go into detail about all types mentioned here, as our main focus today is on scoping reviews. And according to the Canadian Institute of Health Research, scoping reviews are exploratory projects that systematically map the literature available on the topic, identifying key concepts, theories, sources of evidence, and gaps in the research. On the one hand, we do not have to go in detail what actually are the differences across all review types, but I still believe that it is essential to know basic differences because it can help you see what actually you need to do and what actually you need to target on while start working. So, in a nutshell, when the time is the essence, you shall go for a rapid review, which is a form of synthesis that may provide more timely information for decision making compared with standard systematic reviews. On the other hand, if your goal is to measure intervention effectiveness, you must work on a systematic review. Last but not the least, and if your target is to have an overview of a broader field, then scoping review is the solution, simply because it seeks to present an overview of a potentially large and diverse and heterogeneous body of literature pertaining to a broader topic. From this graph available in this slide, it is quite obvious that the scoping review has become an increasingly popular approach for synthesizing research evidence, and their number has increased exponentially in the last 8 to 10 years. Scoping reviews are still a new domain to be explored, but the speed at which their number is rising, we have to know some reason. What is the background? What is the reason behind it? This is because of its usefulness, actually. When you are going to embark on or looking at a topic which you are not familiar with, or if there has not been much written on it, or not been published, or hasn't really been explored before, then it is the type of review that you should work upon. So we all know that actually scoping reviews are used to identify knowledge gaps, and they can help you set research agendas and therefore help us or any researcher to lead to an answer to a very common question, such as what information has been presented on any particular topic in the literature. In the slide, we can see an example on the right side that the aim of the scoping review conducted by our team, which we recently published in a well-reputable and index journal, that is BMC Medical Education. And a reference to all published articles, including scoping reviews, are also provided. So please feel free if any of you wishes to read it for further guidance. In the reference list, you can get all the links. So now question arises, why are scoping reviews so essential, so useful? At this level, you have to ask yourself questions. Number one, if your goal or is your goal is to clarify working definitions and conceptual boundaries of any pertinent or particular topic, or if you're working on a body of literature that has not been comprehensively reviewed And if your answer is in yes, then definitely your choice of selection is in scoping review. This slide here provides guidance and shows an example of how did we match our research dynamics while we have been conducting our research and our scoping reviews, which has been undertaken. We had employed 4 main reasons which were identified by Arksy and O'Malley, experts in the field, in 2005 for conducting scoping review. They have given reason number 1 is about working definitions. So we aimed at finding qualities of medical professionalism frequently highlighted in the literature across the globe. Therefore, our research question was, what is frequently highlighted and what are essential attributes of medical professionalism in an undergraduate medical education context? Reason 2 by Axion, Mobile, and Oli is large and complex body of literature. Here we can see the research gaps were there, or in other words, the unavailability of universally agreed definitions pertaining to medical professionalism. Reason number 3, given by Arksy and O'Malley to conduct any scoping review, was about heterogeneous nature. So any topic that is of heterogeneous nature really qualifies for scoping review. And we all know there's a diverse range of interest of various stakeholders. As we all know, that medical professionalism in literature being stated as a tripod of individual, interpersonal, and societal norms. Reason number 4, which has been posed by Arksy and O'Malley, well, to start conducting a scoping review is if you want to have a precursor before starting a full systematic review. So yes, we also had the same reason, this 4th reason, because we has aimed as and we have intended to carry out a full systematic review in near future. Here again, Arksy and O'Malley have provided explicit step-by-step guide, or we can call it methodological framework for scoping reviews, which we have adopted for our all scoping reviews so far. In this slide, we explain with examples from our personal experiences as what did we do at every stage. So stage number 1 is identifying the research question. So what we did, this being the most important element of scoping review as it concerns with the issues in which the research is to be taken place. For instance, the research question for one of our scoping review was, what are common coping strategies by medical students in the undergraduate context? Now we come to the second stage, which is to identify relevant studies. So what we did was we employed a 3-step search. First, a primary search through Google Scholar and PubMed and Scopus and other various search engines. Our authors conducted out an evaluation of the content within the title and the abstracts and also in the index terms. This way, we have accomplished this second stage. Stage 3rd is about study selection. So what went for us in practical at this particular stage, the articles directly matching or similar to our mentioned keywords were recognized. But again, we have employed 3-stage screening for titles, for abstracts, and for the full text. Moreover, later on, the full content was again deeply looked at to determine fitness for inclusion. At this stage, the collection method of full text articles was accomplished again by 2 researchers. And a 3rd researcher was available to resolve any conflicts if any were found there. Stage 4 is about charting the data. An example of how did it look like, we have kept a slide to be shown to you all in the later part of our presentation, but here we just want to let you know that at this particular stage, we developed an initial, or you may call it a provisional form of tabulation for relevant data from the included studies. So initially, randomly chosen articles were individually studied and reviewed by 2 researchers who drafted the data extraction form to ensure that their tactic for data extraction is constantly reliable and consistent with our research questions, which we had predetermined. The final form involved many important headings such as study features, year of publication, sample size, methods, and research focus area pertaining to our research questions. So stage 5 is about collating, summarizing, and reporting the results. Here, at this important stage, we were able to recognize thematic categories of the literature, which has involved various segments, which has comprised methods, evidence, defining results, and implications as well. Once all the data were assembled and some opening information had been recognized, a detailed meeting again between the authors was held to discuss the data analysis strategy, interpretation, discussion, and the way how we would in future write the manuscript for publication. So basically, data analysis mainly involved qualitative thematic analysis. At this stage, which is called as consultation, then this is optional. But while ongoing, consultation may occur in other types of studies if somebody is conducting any other kind of review. The consultation phase, particularly in scoping study, is to be viewed as a formalized and distinct phase. It involves key informants, it involves stakeholders, it involves experts in the field of inquiry. And this particular consultation phase in scoping studies, if undertaken, remember, if undertaken, really requires formal recruitment, data collection, qualitative approaches for analysis and interpretation. So alternatively, we can say that it's a formal stage by Arksey and O'Malley framework, where experts and key informants are formally consulted. It's not an informal consultation where you work and you go and ask any of your colleagues to have a look at it. No, it's a formal consultation on the results of the literature review, which would provide you with further insights on your experiential evidence, and they might guide you something more important and provide recommendation for moving forward. In this slide and the slides onwards, we will start now discussing some tips which shall work for the beginners as well as for the experts in the field to get reminded, to get revisited of what to look for if you have decided or you already have started work on a scoping review. So always keep in mind that a scoping review is not necessarily less work than a systematic review. Keep this misconception out of your mind. Do not think that a scoping review is something lighter in terms of your time and efforts. Always try to avoid framing the rationale or keeping the statements in negative form. For example, we are doing a scoping review because we are not assessing the quality, or because we are not doing a meta-analysis. No, never, never, ever state such statements in your review as a rationale. Keep in mind, you do not have to reinvent the wheel. So how would you know that you are not wasting your time by trying to reinvent the wheel? You have to check protocol search. If there has been protocol already done and been registered with a similar aims and objectives and the research questions which you now are trying to start, so try to avoid doing so. And you can also find scoping review search to check if your particular concerns, if your particular broader category of question is already been addressed by some other experts in the field before you, so you will not fall in trap of reinventing the wheel. Two important points are to do. One is to develop pilot scoping, and second is to have a protocol. Actually, it is very important to have a pilot scoping review before your actual real scoping review. So what does it do? Piloting of the review will help you to get in-depth process of study selection and data extraction, which will help you to ensure an universal understanding of the constructs of the interest. Your study selection criteria would be obvious. Your characteristics of interest for extraction, even among your members of the team, would be very explicit. Now coming to the protocol. The protocol is nothing but a plan or methodology of your scoping review. You need to develop your protocol at the very beginning of the process, even before you start your searches. You may refine your protocol as you progress through your review, and it's but very natural, it's but very common because of the iterative nature, ever-changing nature of a scoping review that you may necessitate to have some changes later on. But those changes, you would have to report them in your actual scoping review. So question now arises, why a protocol is important? I must say developing a scoping review protocol is essential because of the reason that it predefines your objectives, your methods, your reporting of the review. It allows you for transparency of all the process. At the same time, the protocol should detail the criteria that you tend to use to include or exclude sources of evidence. It will also help you to identify what data is relevant and how the data will be extracted and presented. Protocol basically, in simple words, I may say, provide you with a plan for your scoping review from start to end. Moreover, any deviations, as we already have stated, which are quite normal, which are quite natural, the scoping review in later stage might present you something that is different from what was kept in your protocol. So do not worry. Simply state them with clear highlighting and explanations in your scoping review. And it is not considered as a drawback for your quality of the work. So the last but not the least, the very important question, how to register your protocol, or we may say where to register your protocol. Jonah Big Institute, their reviews get registered via Jonah Big Institute. We call them JBI Systematic Reviews Register. But non-JBI reviews can be registered via an open search repository. The examples are Open Science Framework. And by the way, this Open Science Framework is highly recommended by Prisma Scoping Review Guidance. And the other area where other register where you can try to register your protocol is Figshare. It depends on your level of familiarity, that which one you feel good or easy or comfortable to start registering your protocol with. Here I would say, and you have to keep in mind that because it's very common for many researchers or many novice beginner researchers that they have heard the platform of Prospero. And everybody thinks, or most of the candidates, our junior colleagues, they think that Prospero is a place where you can register your scoping reviews. But to clarify, I must say, please note that Prospero accepts registrations for systematic reviews and rapid reviews and umbrella reviews. But at present, unfortunately, Prospero doesn't accept scoping reviews or any literature scans. It is recommended to keep the term scoping review in the title. almost every journal, wherever you are going to submit after completion, obviously, after completion of your work, when you strive to submit your scoping review to any journal, this is basic requirement of 99.9% of the journals. They ask you to keep the term scoping review itself in the title. So on the right hand side, in the green shaded area, you can see it's an example from our personal scoping review. And you can see our title was a scoping review on frequently highlighted and most important attributes of medical professionalism in an undergraduate medical education context. Second recommendation is to use PCC numeric. In our example, you can again see that our population was medical students. Our concept was their attitudes, behaviors, and professionalism. The context we kept was undergraduate. Regarding sources and search engines, your sources and the strategy for search must be described in detailed way. It should be as much detailed, as much explicit that it could be repeated, it could be reproduced at any time. And for that, you may include details, for instance, databases that you have utilized with dates of coverage, the last date you did your search. You have to put limits, for example, any filters, for instance, publication types, languages. And last but not the least, you also need to mention how did you search for the gray literature itself. You do not have to leave gray literature aside. I hope at this stage, when we are almost at the middle of our presentation today, many of you or a few of you have started thinking that literature search and to conduct scoping review with multiple reasons, the 4 reasons, and the 5 stages of methodological framework, and the 6th one being optional. It's very hectic. But thanks to the available search engine software tools, most of them are free to use. And I believe, and as I have experienced, that most of them are very easy to use. They may take you some time to get familiarized with, but believe me, once you are familiarized with, you will feel you are in heaven. We have search engines that everybody knows with the name PubMed, Medline, Embase, Eric, Google Scholar, and others. We have general tools like Covidence, and we have Distill SR, Distill Scoping Review, Distill Systematic Review, whatever name you can give them. We have citation managers, EndNote and Mendeley, with which most of our master level students are already aware for saving their time. And we also have tools for meta-analysis, like Distill SR, Forest Plot Generator, RevMan, Cochrane. And I hope many of you must have been aware and familiarized with most of them and been expert more than me. So you have to utilize them to make your life easy. Useful tools doesn't end in the previous slide, but they also include, and they are very much recommended actually, like Prisma flow diagram and Prisma checklist. Prisma basically stands for preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. Most of the searches when you start the beginning might yield a very large and extremely huge number of documents. But with your screening process at a later stage, you may further refine, and at last, you'll be successful in getting a few important studies to be included in your actual scoping review. And at this stage, Prisma comes in very handy You may find the links for these all documents in the reference list at the end of today's presentation. When it comes to adding your inclusion and exclusion criteria, which most of our researchers, beginners take very lightly, and this being a very, very common point of or reason of cause of rejection by the journals. So keep in mind, this is of utmost importance that you add your inclusion and exclusion criteria in a detailed way. On the right hand side, this is again an example of how explicitly we had formulated the inclusion and exclusion criteria while doing one of our scoping reviews. So you can see we had kept study characteristics as a time period, type of article, research design, publication type, participants, and we have given equal importance to the exclusion criteria as well. So when you will come to the stage of screening, that might challenge you, but keep consistent in your positive thinking that initially the typical process of identifying eligible or ideal studies always begin with screening abstracts. Basically, at the beginning, you have a large number of documents. A very large number of documents may go beyond your imagination, hundreds of thousands. But when they are further reviewed again and again, later on, you will be left with fewer but important documents. And to accomplish this important task, from getting a larger number of or a huge number of citations and documents to a few important documents to be included in your final review, what you have to do? You have to adopt 3-step plans. Step number 1, abstract screening. This is based on the inclusion criteria and pilot. Second, include 2 or more reviewers who independently would carry out the screening for titles and abstracts. Last but not the least, with an exclusive screening, the documents which you feel are inconsistent with your predefined inclusion and exclusion criteria should be thrown out. This is again a very important slide. And here we can see that what you have to avoid and what you want not to miss. So on the right hand side, it is shown an example as what we have carried out. We piloted initially at the beginning of our review, we started piloting with 10 randomly selected articles. And our 2 researchers works towards enlisting abstraction form for the data independently. We listed and defined all our variables that were related with professionalism attributes so that we do not miss or lose any important variable in the form of professionalism attributes. Here is an example of how charting the data might look like. For scoping reviews, when we say extracting the data, it's simply we are referring to as charting the data. The goal with the charting is to create a descriptive summary of the results which address scoping reviews objectives that you have predefined and answer your research questions for your particular review. You may see the key information to chart for each source should or might include authors, years of publication, objective purpose, number of participants, sample study design, important results, and key findings particularly related to your research question. Always present your results. Always present your results in diagrammatic or tabular form. You can use numerical summary as well. You can use descriptive format. You can use narrative summary, but this all has to be aligned with the strategic objectives and scope of the review. Make sure, keep in mind, do not forget, and make sure your outcomes are truly consistent with the purpose that has been stated in your research question or has been employed as a main objective of your study. And again, not to forget, use Prisma flow diagram. I would like to highlight this interesting finding by Trico et al. In 2016. What they found that in the result sections or in the conclusion sections of many of the studies they have conducted, they saw in most cases the result of scoping review were used to identify three main things: to identify evidence gap, to provide recommendation for future research, and to identify strengths and limitations. So you can also, or I must say, you must state your limitation and challenges while finishing your scoping review. And it's but natural and common to see one similar statement across many of the published scoping reviews, which is, I quote, the most frequent limitation reported in the reviews was the possibility that the review may have missed some relevant studies. It's but nature. Probably it might occur because sometimes we use different search engines. And it's human nature when we are working in an environment where different people are working to sort, different people are working to check the quality of the, to check the content of the included studies. There are chances as a human weakness, as a human error, that there might be some important content to be missed. At the same time, I must encourage you by saying that at any stage, either you are a beginner being given a task by your supervisor or by your mentors or seniors or colleagues or your teachers to start working on a scoping review, and you feel tired, you feel that your mental traffic has been jammed, and if you are just like getting a sense of restlessness and depression, always keep telling yourself, you didn't come this far to quit. So do not quit at any stage. So once all your work has been done in a proper fashion, appropriately accomplished all stages, and if you have adopted axiomally methodological framework and you have kept a checklist of 4 reasons by axiomally before starting your scoping review, and your answer comes yes for all these reasons, and if you have conducted your research, you have done your work well, now time comes for you publishing your work. I do not have to give you any hint on how you are going to pass through this challenging stage, because this part will be discussed in the next presentation by a very senior, respected, distinguished presenter, Associate Professor Dr. Saiful Bahari. This slide works as a summary, a very fast, very explicit, very brief, very straightforward. You have to develop protocol, and keep in mind that if you have forgotten anything that has been shown to you in the past slides, but if you keep this slide with you in this sequence, if your work is conducted, believe me, there are high chances that you are going to successfully conduct a scoping review. Start with developing a protocol. Mention your review question objectives explicitly. Maintain your eligibility criteria with a rationale. Start searching from one database, then start including other databases. Always scan reference lists. Always try to search gray literature, screen titles and abstracts, and try to do it by 2 or more than 2 reviewers. Screen full text, have a predefined charting form. Later on, it could be refined with the passage of time. Chart your data, and you can see at many important stages, we are keeping 2 or more than 2 reviewers. Always present your results with diagrams, with tables, or whichever way you are comfortable with. Don't forget to use flow diagram, that is Prisma flow diagram, and always use Prisma checklist. That will help you maintain the quality of your scoping review. While presenting the result or while formulating the results, identify implication for research. That what implication your current research has to make for the academicians, for other stakeholders, for healthcare workers, and so on. And last but not the least, always identify and state implication for future practice. Here we have summary in diametric form. As a very quick, I can say the step 1, as you have to decide your topic, then you have to develop search question. You have to do data search. Once you complete your data search, you have to see for the duplicates and remove them. Of course, the next step will be screening in 2 steps. First, you screen the titles, abstracts, and then you screen full text. Next thing, obviously, is extraction and writing. One last thing you need to remember to make sure that while doing this whole process, always keep using Prisma checklist. This checklist would guide you and help you from beginning to end. And without that checklist, there are high chances that you might compromise quality of your scoping review. So there are some standards and guidelines. You can go in detail and check them in detail. There are chapters of scoping reviews by JBI, Jonavics Institute Manual. Prisma reviews are there, scoping reviews, what are they and how you can do them. It's from Cochrane. These all are trusted sites. And they are very senior researchers who has been in the field since long, like Tricot et al. And they have put a methods paper on scoping review. They are advancing scoping study methodology. There are still upcoming reporting guidelines, which you have to keep an eye on. And there's been an extension of the Prisma statement is for scoping review. It's underway. That would be particularly specifically addressing scoping review for extension. So keep an eye on these all available contents in the literature. Keep in touch with your seniors, with your colleagues, with your mentors, supervisors. And again, keep reminded, do not reinvent the wheel, but what you can do is to make a better wheel if you want to do. So here we end with our talk, and terima kasih. Thank you so very much. Jazakallah khair for your time and for your patience to listen this long talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kamran, for the wonderful talks on tips and tricks on writing scoping review. I believe that your talk is not just important for the beginner, but it's also a refresher, for the those that already used to writing a scoping review. And for those that have questions for Dr. Kamran, please type your question in the chat box, or you can wait until the end of the second talk, during the Q&A session to post your question to Dr. Kamran. Thank you again, Dr. Kamran. Okay, now let's go to our second talk of today, which is on tips and tricks on publishing scoping review by Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari Yusoff. Okay, I think everyone know who is Professor Dr. Saiful, but for formality, let me introduce him properly. Okay, so Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari is an Associate Professor and Head Department of Medical Education, School of Medical Science, Unit USM. He is a medical doctor with Master of Science and PhD in medical education. So he has published more than 200 articles related to medical student well-being, mental health, psychometric, validity, reliability, development of measurement tool, personality, emotional intelligence, student admission and assessment in various reputable journals. He is also the editor-in-chief of Education in Medicine Journal, and he also served as a reviewer to various journals. He has been invited as speakers for conferences, seminars, and workshops related to medical and higher education. He has received many awards, for example, Gold Medal for Reimagine Education Teaching Delivery Award 2016, Best of the Best Award, and Gold Medal for International Innovative Practice in Higher Education 2016, Excellent Educator Award in 2016, International Leadership Award in 2017, Gold Medal Award for Innovative Practice in Higher Education 2014, and also like Ronald Hayden Innovation in Medical Education Award in 2013. He is the president of Malaysian Association of Education in Medicine and Health Sciences, the regional director of East Asia and national coordinator of International Society for Emotional Intelligence, and a fellow of National Higher Education Research Institute. He has completed a one-year medical education editorial internship program provided by Editorial Board of Medical Education Journal, Association for Study in Medical Education from UK. Yeah. So, without further ado, let's welcome Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Saiful Bahari to give his talk. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone, wherever you are. All right, thank you so much for a kind introduction. Can you see my slide properly now? All right. All right, so I hope you can see my slide now. All right. Okay, so good.
Yes.
So I'm going to share some of my things related to tips and tricks to successfully publish scoping review papers. And I think that the Kamran already introduced so many things just now, and it is really facilitate my presentation. Also easy for me to explain and to proceed from whatever Dr. Kamran has stopped just now. Okay, I hope that it will add on a certain aspect that has not been covered by him, but maybe I will reinforce on certain things that important to be highlighted as part of reinforcement on the importance of certain facts that really need to be to be focused for. All right, so let's start with publication goals. Let's start with the publication goals. I think the goal is not to publish in the journal with the highest impact factor, but to publish in the journal that will increase our impact in the field. I think that will be, a contradict to what our belief now. We are basically looking at the highest impact factor, but without considering what will be the impact of our scoping review or whatever publication we have in the field. I think this is something that we need to think again before we publish, all right? And particularly for the scoping review, because there are so many journals that are available online at this moment, but the way we choose the journals that will increase the impact and visibility of our research in the field, that will be very important. All right, so as Dr. Kamran mentioned rightly, basically the scoping review is a part of review manuscript. So basically this is where you are going to tick when you submit your manuscript. Don't tick on the original article, commentary, letter, whatsoever. So just tick on the review papers in terms of the category of submission. Okay, so there are so many things that we can discuss, but we are going to focus on this particular category. And before we publish and after we have written our papers, we need to think again, who is our target audience? So because we are the authors in the other side, and then at the other end is our readers. And the journals is basically just a bridge to connect we, which is the authors, with the appropriate readers. So we need to know who are the audience, who are the readers before we start to choose which journal that we want to submit, because there are certain journals have a very specific readership, so we need to know, and there are certain journals who are very wide readership, so we need to really think again and again, even though we already written a complete scoping review papers. I think there is something that we need to reflect a little bit, read again our papers again and again until we are very clear who are our readers. Then we decide to submit which journal that suit with our readership. And in terms of, before we submit, we need to reflect on 4 main key questions for our readers, because we are talking about readers, and reviewers also our readers. Remember that reviewers are our readers. They are the one who is going to read our papers, so they are our readers. So we must ensure that they really have what it should have when they are reading our paper. For example, let's say why this scoping needs to be written. So I think once we have written our paper, try to reflect and read our paper again and again, why I wrote this scoping reviews paper. So if we can answer clearly and it can connect with our readers, so I say we could say that, okay, this is a pass, one. So, and what we did, are we clear with whatever the steps are already presented by Dr. Kamran just now? And when we read through our papers, are we getting the same information? Are we getting the same understanding what we understand? And do our readers also have the same understanding? So I think this is very important, what we did, and then trying to reflect on our own. And then what we found. So this is something that dealing with when you chart the data, from the scoping review, basically you are charting the data. Do we understand what we found? Okay, so because we need to put ourselves in the reader's shoes. So if we are the readers of the paper, can we get it what the main message from the results? If we are still confusing with that, we need to redo on our results. So again and again until we have a clear understanding, as much as we want the readers trying to understand our results. All right. If let's say yes, then we go to the next level. How will this scoping contribute to the field? So this is something we need to ponder on ourselves before we submit to any journal. To what extent this paper that we have written completely in the full manuscript according to the journal, how it will contribute to the field? Are we repeating the same fact that already being established in the literature, or are we adding something, at least a new understanding about what is happening in the field, in whatever aspect? If yes, then we can proceed and then we can submit our paper to the journal. So these are 4 basic questions from the readership's perspective, right? And definitely, in terms of the sequence of papers, as was mentioned rightly by Dr. Kamran, is the usual, and there's nothing different with the scoping review paper, similar. All right, so if you look at the original papers and scoping review is similar. So basically, this is something that we really need to understand. It's no different, just a matter of the methodology. We are using scoping review framework that was mentioned by Dr. Kamran just now. Okay, so I would like to share now. Let's say you already passed the first stage of before you submit. All right, the pre-submission stage where you are reflecting on the papers that you have written completely. So there are 7 tips to successfully publish. So I'm going to just highlight the 7 tips here in terms of context, format, content, imitation. I would like to emphasize on imitation after what it means by imitation, impact, language, and revision. So these are the areas that I'm going to share on the tips or the tricks that I can share with all the participants today. Okay, let's start with the content, all right? So tip number 1, fit the content of the targeted journal. So basically the context of target journal, for example, like, because I'm the editor for IMJ, let me use IMJ as an example. For example, we really need to know what is the journal publishing. So I think this is something that we really need to understand that before we submit to that particular journal. For example, for IMJ, for example, is about medical, dental, and allied health sciences education. So anything not related to this, do not submit to this journal because the context is for that particular purpose. And if you dive deep into it, so you can see basic science education, clinical education, like health education, interprofessional education, and so on and so forth. I think it is something that we really need to know the targeted journals coverage and in terms of their what context they are really interested in. So I think it is very important before we start submitting our papers to the journal. And then what kind of studies that in other areas that will have direct implication to the area, for example, in the medical education, because it's under IMJ. So maybe, engineering, maybe something that related to that, maybe law in terms of implication later on, higher education, implication to medical. So there are so many things that we can cover under this one. That will enrich further our context and it will create more interest because it will not only discussing about the medical education per se, but we have been looking at the perspective that may have implication to medication from various perspectives. That will be more interesting. And last on this, I think we need to ensure that we know exactly what the focus theme of the area. For example, here, is it curriculum? Is it teaching learning? There are so many other things. And there is an example that I would like to share where we went in the context of health professional education. Is it assessment, test development, curriculum design, teacher learning, faculty and student development, and so on and so forth. I think we need to be very clear which area that we are targeting for our paper to be published. I think this is very important before we submit our paper. Otherwise, it's easily being rejected. And we also need to look at what the geographical distribution of article published in that particular journal. Example, IMJ, we can see there's a quite wider readership. So we need to ensure that the paper is not only talking about our local context. We need to ensure that how that findings will can be learned from other context as well. It's not only local, but in fact beyond the local context. That will be putting more no interest by the readers while reading our papers, in particular the reviewers. So we need to consider this. And then tips number 2, okay, that's done with the context. I think that is very fundamental to everyone and is quite familiar. You are all very familiar with that, but for the SOP review, you need to give more attention about it. And then tips number 2, comply to the journal format. I think this is something that we really need to ensure that now when we are submitting, we are following the journal guideline. Otherwise, you have a lot of troubles being unsubmitted, or sometimes if let's say the journal is highly, have a high submissions per year, and definitely because of the format alone, your article will get outright reject, which is is very unfortunate. So let me give you an example. Let's say just spend your time, all right? Spend your time to read through the journal guidelines. Try to follow whatever has been mentioned in the guidelines, and then trying to follow, and then make sure that you read through the criteria for each of the article category, because every journal has their own criteria, particularly in terms of the word count. What will be the minimum, what will be the maximum, and furthermore, in terms of citation style, every journal has their own preference in terms of the citation style. So please be careful with all this. It looks minor, but for any journal that has a high submission rates, definitely these sort of minor errors make them feel that your papers are worth for rejection. So please be careful with that. We want to give a good impression to the journal even upon the submission. And please make sure that the figure we follow the format, because sometimes, with a low resolution figures will irritate the editors as well as the reviewers who are the readers of our paper. So be focusing on this and pay more attention to all these format related matters, right? And tips number 3, write clear, organized, and meaningful content. I will go through one by one, just a kind of tips and suggestion for you to consider. So I will go to abstract, introduction, method, result, discussion, conclusion, step by steps with some of the examples. Okay, let's start with the abstracts. I think if you are looking at, I think majority of editors, particularly chief editor, read your abstracts and make decision, majority, all right? So be careful with abstract. Make sure the abstract really concise and impactful, all right? So when they read your abstract, they are getting interested, okay? And then it should be understood by someone even without any prior knowledge of the topic, particularly in your area, all right? So make as simple as even those who without prior knowledge can understand. And then in your abstract, you must highlight that what are the gaps or the issues or the problems that you really want to address with your scoping reviews, all right, as was mentioned by Kamran. And then it also should clearly mention about the research objective of your aim or even objective of your scoping review. And you need to mention what the framework you are using. And most is either Asiomali or Prisma scoping review. I think you need to mention in the abstract, and then you just summarize important and key results in the abstract that give implication to people who are reading. It means that something when they read, oh wow, it kind of, wow, this result is very important, right? And then state the main conclusion. And if you have more word count that is allowed for abstract, there are certain journal allow more word counts for abstract, then you can state the limitation and important recommendation that you already made in maybe discussion, but you like to highlight in the abstract. So these are things that makes your papers having more chances to get through the first stage of chief editor. All right, so abstract is very important. It's kind of window to your paper, a window to your scoping review paper. So please be more careful with your abstract construction, right? And now, in terms of introduction, so basically what we are looking at, basically trying to put your first paragraph is about what is the main topic of your scoping review, and then what are the gaps or the problems that lead you to conducting these scoping reviews, and how this scoping review will fill in this important gap. I think there's a first introduction just to to grasp the chief editor in chief editor to have a kind of, all right, this is important, all right? And then the rest, the literature review, as usual, state what are the previous research that explain the need for this scoping review, and then cite thoroughly, but not excessively. This is very important, sometimes we cite excessively, but not thoroughly. So it's two different things, cite thoroughly, but not excessively, cite excessively, but not thoroughly. So I think that is very important. And do not miss any landmark or even most recent and relevant article. That will be, a kind of, bizarre mistakes, because when you do not put a landmark or maybe landmark articles in your literature, it seems that you are not doing thorough literature review. All right, it seems excessive, but in terms of the thoroughness of literature, it seems to be a bit lacking because you do not include very, very important articles in the field. All right, so be careful with that. Avoid too many citations for one point unless necessary. So usually, we do not encourage you to put so many citations to support one argument or one point in the text. Maybe one or two or three maximum per 1 point, and even it's very good if point by point is only less than 2 citation. That will give more space for other citation to or maybe other reference to be cited in subsequent statements, right? So I think that is very important. Please avoid that, and you need to remember as well, most of journal have limits in terms of number of references can be included in scoping review. So usually not more than 80, but certain is not more than 50. So depending on the guideline, I think you need to read the guideline before you start writing your scoping review papers for that particular journal, right? And then the third one, I think, closing paragraph is only one paragraph, but you state what are the research question that you are trying to address in this scoping review, and then describe how can you accomplish or how can you answer the questions, and then give preview of the expected result. But because you already have some ideas about what kind of the results, and at the end of the day, state what will be the possible implication of your work into the current knowledge. So because scoping review is about clarifying certain concept or new concept or maybe certain gaps in literature, and then that is very important for you to state that clearly in the last paragraph of your introduction. That's usually we are looking at. There's a kind of tips you need to pay attention when you are writing your introduction. And then in terms of method, there are so many. There's definitely, as Kamran mentioned, it must be rigorously mentioned, and then you need to know how to develop protocol. But when you translate the protocol into the manuscript and before submission, please make sure that you follow exactly what has been recommended by certain guidelines. All right, for example, Asia O'Malley and Prisma for scoping review. So I think there is something that as a reviewers, as well as a chief editor, we're looking at when you're talking about scoping review, which guideline do you follow, tactfully. So I think it is very important to put clearly in the methods. And there is a scoping review, protocol that was mentioned. So I think it is very important for you to cite because it is a landmark paper, landmark article. So do not miss this one. And then definitely, if you are looking at scoping review, as Kamran mentioned just now, is a kind of exploratory research question. You are systematically searching for article and you synthesize to create new knowledge or maybe to create a better understanding about certain things that we are scoping at. And then framework, definitely the 6-stage framework, or maybe even you can use a Prisma right now. And the critical factor is to follow the scoping review properly, step by steps. And remember the purpose, as was mentioned by Kamran, to map what are the key concept, what are the evidence, or maybe even gaps in research to a specific defined area of field. I think it is very important for us to have this idea when we are trying to publish our scoping review, so that our scoping review is becoming more meaningful to the readers. And the step already mentioned about mentioned by Kamran, so I do not want to put more the descriptions, and you can always read description in the study because it's already available there. And I think Kamran already mentioned quite clearly about the steps and how to do it. Okay, now results. In terms of result, there are a few things that you need to remember when we are presenting or when we are trying to convince reviewers as well as the editors or maybe the deputy editors for them to decide whether to accept for further evaluation or just to stop and reject our paper. One is the data, whatever data you put must be presented systematically. How? When you read through, you know the sequence, you know the logical sequence behind that and many other things. So I think it is very important to show to the editors as well as to the deputy editor that we present our data in a logical sequence. It's not something that jumping here, jumping there, and there is no sequence. Okay, logical, systematically range of our results, and then correspond with the research question objective. We must ensure that you must be aligned with the research question objective. And then it's up to you, whichever you want to put it, either in tables, chart, graph, or other figure, it's up to you, as long as it is easily understood by the readers. So that is very important. And then whatever the, whatever the data you put, you must provide adequate information. So, adequate information. So this is something that you need to follow certain, certain, we call it certain ways that is recommended, as was mentioned by Dr. Kamran just now. I think that should be, something that we must put it clearly. And then put a contextual analysis. I think it is very important. Whatever you got, you must put in the context and how it can, be make sense of others people from our not outside of our context. So it's very important. And if you have a secondary findings, so subgroup it and then put it clearly during your analysis. So that is very, very important. And then in terms of discussion, I think whatever you put in discussion, it must relate your findings. It must relate with your finding, because when you put in in tangent with the findings, with the research questions or research objective, it will make more meaningful in terms of the how people see the link between your findings and your objective, and you discuss it in the context, right? And usually, this is something that tips that I would like to share with you. Usually what we recommend is in the first paragraph, all right, you summarize the key findings in clear and concise language. This is something that when we are reading, when the readers read about your paragraph of discussion, you know that, okay, these are the key findings that we are going to discuss. All right. For example, let's say you say, okay, the scoping reviews provide 5 important and essential findings that is worth for further discussion and elaboration. 1, what, 2nd, what, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So I think there is kind of first paragraph that I used to do and is recommended to do. And then in the subsequent paragraph, for each of the findings that you already highlighted in the first paragraph, you discuss thoroughly. Yeah, how to discuss thoroughly and critically is one is put the statement of the key findings and compare the findings with the previous study. And perhaps later on, once you already compare with whatever the findings that are already published in the previous studies, then give your postulation to the finding. I mean that what you think, what you postulate out of these findings. And your postulation should be supported by certain references that that's supporting your postulation. And if there is something that unexpected findings, either in the positive way or in a negative way, I mean negative way is against what we know, what we found, something that maybe we have to acknowledge and perhaps provide our hypothesis why it is against what has been understood before. If this happen, there's a kind of unexpected finding. Then the whole paragraph, for example, let's say you have 5 key findings, we expect 5 paragraphs. You mean that 1 paragraph per finding for your discussion, and you can follow this, you can follow this framework throughout your discussion. And usually it will drive very well and it gives more meaning to whatever you have discussed. All right. And then final paragraph, usually we discuss something, an unanswered question, maybe out of this finding, something that is you are kind of, there are certain things that has not been answered. So this is something unanswered question you can put in terms of what the future recommendation, what can be done further, what has to be done in the future to fill up the gap that we identify from scoping review and so on and so forth. There are so many things you can highlight in the final paragraph, and it's always good to put your statement or discussion on what will be the impact of your scoping review results in certain aspect, policy, maybe the practice, or even future studies as part of your impact. And then conclusion, definitely as Kamran mentioned, strength limitation should be there. The implication must be put into context according to your finding, and then future research is always good to be recommended as part of your part of your, as a result of your scoping reviews, and then provide what are the takeaway statement to the end of the to end the manuscript. I think usually this scoping review has highlighted certain things worth for for consideration in the future study, so that it can further enhance our current practice and blah blah blah, something like that. All right. And tip number 4, imitation. All right. So this is something that I would like to highlight a little bit more, imitation, because do not reinvent the wheel, as was mentioned by Dr. Kamran. So you can see that it's original here. So this is something that is original. And this one is copy, the imitation. So what it means by imitation in scoping review? So it means that, all right, imitation in scoping review, the action of using published scoping review papers as a model for our scoping review papers. It means that we look at any of the published scoping review that's nearly relevant to us, or maybe near to our areas of research, and then we follow how they put it. All right. So this imitation is really, really effective, because we want to learn from the papers and guide us as a model for us to write our scoping review papers. We are not going to copy, paste, or whatever from them, but we want to see the whole structure of the papers as a guide for us to write our scoping review. And it is very useful for beginners. Okay, it is very, very useful for beginners. And I think it's not only beginners, even those already have a good grasp in the scoping review also will be benefited very much by imitation technique. So let me show you what is imitation technique. All right. So let me use, for example, let's say I want to do a scoping review. All right. So I do not have any idea, but I have the knowledge, what are the steps and so on and so forth. So perhaps, I'm using our own examples here. For example, let's say in terms of trying to imitate a certain way of publish articles, put their title, for example. So I will analyze, this one is the outcomes. All right. So I can change with my outcomes. All right. And then there's a condition. Yeah, definitely I can change with the condition that I'm studying right now for my scoping review. And then this is the sample. Yeah, according to my sample, is this one medical student, maybe my one is nursing student, for example. All right. And then what is the context? It's during undergraduate medical education, and it is a scoping review. So I think we only need to replace whatever this title already accepted as a publication with our own template. You can change. Your outcome is what your outcome. By what, who, what condition, and then in which context. So this is a kind of imitation that we can always do even for the title. And then the critical part is about, the introduction, maybe it's different field. It's very difficult for us to imitate, but the methodology for the scoping review, I would say that more or less a kind of template. All right. So let's see. If let's say we are looking at how are we going to start our methodology writing. So basically, you're just reading, okay, we aim to use, I think it's quite good, but now I will put in my context. See? I will put my context. It's a one way. And if you read more papers of the scoping review within almost same context with us, I think we can see what will be the best way we introduce our methods in our paper. And this will attract the readers to read more with a very good way of introducing our methodology of scoping review. I think these are examples. And then we go through one by one. For example, okay, this is how this author basically, elaborate the stage 1. Stage 2 like this. Stage 3 like that. Okay, okay, this one. See, everything already there. Just a matter of we read and we imitate and then put in our own words on how we want to express of our scoping review process according to the structure. Now we learn about the structure, and it easily can be done, without much required, a lot of times. So you can save a lot of time, basically, because when you have a template, you can always replicate the template, but with a different purpose according to your research objective and the context of your study for scoping review. I think there is an imitation of the scoping review papers, you can always do. So please do. You can see the difference in terms of your, your presentation of your, the scoping review papers. So it is very helpful. And from my experience, I use a lot of this. Whenever I start to do a scoping review on certain area, I will look at, is there any resemble or similar or near to the area that I'm going to do scoping review. And once it's published, it means that for the readership point of view, there is something that is easy for them to understand. All right, easy for them to understand. And once kids are happy with our writing, all right, the chances to be accepted will be higher, regardless of the impacts of the journal. All right, so regardless of the what the impact factor of the journal. So please learn from previously published papers so that we can plan as well as we can write our scoping review steps in the proper way that is more acceptable and comprehensible by others. All right, so now tip number 5, that is about imitation. Tip number 5 is when we are elaborating on the impacts of our scoping review. All right, our scoping review is always, I'm not really sure how about the others, field, but in my field, I always use the capillary 4 levels of evaluation. So, for example, let's say if you want to say that what the impact of my scoping review in terms of the reaction, immediate how the students how the pupils were looking at this result. So just a reaction and what we can learn from here. I mean that is there anything that we can use it for for that is applicable in terms of the skills or maybe knowledge, adding certain understanding about the topic, or maybe can we change certain things? Is it the policy, the practice, and many other things? Or maybe the result will result in benefits to the organization if they are following whatever we have found in our scoping review. So it is something that we can always do, but there are so many other framework that you can use. But personally, competitive 4 level give a lot of get a lot of idea for me to put which of the impacts level that I'm going to face for my discussion, in terms of the impact. All right. So I think it is very beneficial for you to consider. But every field have their own ways of discussing on impact. So I think it's up to you. But at least please have a framework for you to discuss impact so that it's easy for you to pace your tone for discussion. And tip number 6, write with good English language. Yeah, I think there's something, even though we call it bias in terms of language, because the, English is always is our second language, but perhaps at least not at least trying to improve our English writing, all right? Because at least we want the readers or the reviewers able to understand what we are trying to convey. So that is very, very important. And then free from grammar and syntax error, you can always use Grammarly or maybe any other grammar, we call it applications, so that minor mistake can be easily improved with that, with the AI, the artificial intelligence application, so that you can improve further. And then intelligible text, I think is something that we need to make sure that everything is understandable. All right, so it's not too complicated, it's not too long, it's not too short. All right, it's just nice to convey the message straight to the point. And then for submitted article that is poorly written but potentially have scientific merit, usually the journal will ask you politely, all right, can you send your papers to English editing before we proceed with peer review, right? But be careful if the editor found it scientifically has no merit. So with with poor English, furthermore, definitely they will outright reject our paper. So though English is something looks technically biased, but that is the reality because most of our journal publish in English. All right, so most of our journal publish English. That has been in databases, for example, in the WS or even the Scopus. So be careful, and I think how to to get away from this problem. Maybe if you have a kind of budget, maybe small budget, depending on your budget, maybe it's good to send it to proficient English authors or writers to have a check, to have a look on our papers before we submit to the Takir Journal. And this is particularly important if you are looking at the high impact journal, right? The high impact journal always looking at the intelligent text and comprehensible text. If they cannot understand with the high submission numbers per year, they are easily rejecting your manuscript, even though your manuscript have a very important finding. So be careful with that. And in other in certain journals, they are not so worried about the English language as long as it is acceptable. So, but they will go through the peer review. But at certain points, certain point, particularly before the publication, they will ask you to send it to English proofreading, particularly professional English proofreading. So I think if you want to get publications in terms of chances higher, so it's always good to have someone who are good in writing using English to have a check and to have a look at your papers. It's very, very important. Very important. And tip number 7 is about revision. Right, submit a thorough revised manuscript. I think it is very, very good. For example, let's say your manuscript already been through the process of peer review and come back with a major revision, for example. So it is a good sign. So don't worry, it's a good sign, even a major revision. So I think one is we need to compose a good response letters. I will show you a little bit of example afterward. And then it's always good for point by point response to reviewers. I will show you after this as well. And if let's say, for example, we decide not to change according to the suggestion, we'll rebut politely. So I will give you example as well after this. Highlight changes in the manuscript, red, blue, font color, whatsoever lah. As long as you want to indicate that there is revision happening based on the highlighted text, all right? And proofread your revision again if necessary. Okay, this example is a point by point. So you put a comment, you respond, in which page is quite normal. But if you want to impress the reviewer's editor, you put a comment specifically to the text that you have made changes according to the reviewers. For example, here, reviewer tools, mention about matching method, page 4, whatsoever, and then auto respond, and you highlighted at the point of your revisions. You mean that the changes that you made. So this will impress the editor as well as the reviewers. It's just a matter of they just endorse, and the revisions will be smoothly done. All right. So, and if you want to write something, you use whatever they put here according to the instruction, and it is one of example as well. For example, let's say because it's the second round and then you do not agree with the editor as well as the reviewers, you can put politely what is your rebuttal here. So the editor, why doing blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So just use a polite rebuttal way so that the editors and reviewers are not so disappointed, because we are not listening to or maybe not responding to whatever they have suggested. But write it clearly with adequate information. So this is how we handle revision as professional as possible. And I think I like this. I like doing this. This is very, very helpful, and they really like it very much. All right. And in summary, so there are 7 tips just now, fit the context, comply to journal format, content must be meaningful and clearly organized. Limitation is very good for you, particularly for the beginners. Impact of your research must be clearly elaborated, using good English, and submit a thorough revised manuscript. And finally, there's a bonus. So find the right journal. How to find the right journal? So this is something that we need to, sometimes we need to be careful, because submitting articles to unsuitable journal is the most common mistake authors do. And what is the consequence? It basically waste of time, resources, money, and motivation. I think everyone has been rejected before, isn't it? In terms of publication, what does it feel? So it's not nice feeling, isn't it? Sometimes, because of the rejection, it will affect our motivation to write more papers. So I think, please find right journal. How to find it? Here, these are 6 journal finders that I used to use so far. So basically, Elsevier, there's a Ling, Tailors and Franchise. This one, Springer Nature, Wiley, Web of Science, and Journal Guide. So let me show you something that I would like to share here. Okay, where is this one? Let's go for Web of Science, because nowadays people are talking a lot about high impact factor whatsoever. So let's put here. All right, just copy that link and put here. So basically, it will lead to the journal finders. Okay, this one is Clarivate. All right, just to demonstrate it to you a little bit. All right, and definitely you have to log in for Web of Science. They require you to register before you can use it. So register is basically it's a free of charge. All right, let me log in. Hopefully it won't show my password. Oh, very slow. All right. So yes, there's link. Right. And then so I always use all these journal finders, not even for scoping review, for even the usual papers, research paper. All right. So where is the all right? So mesh manuscript, so it's already there, mesh manuscript. And then you just put, for example, like a scoping review on effective learning techniques, for example, for undergraduate teaching. All right, undergraduate teaching. All right, so this a dummy. Okay, then I also put the same title and then find journal. So what sort of journal that will be proposed by the system? All right, so you can see that there are so many journals. So you can this one journal, sustainability is Q1, but it's open access. Applied science, so frontier in psychology, clinical medicine, and there's so many things. All right, so medical teachers and many more. And if you're looking at, because remember we are looking for the right journals, so you can always, let's say, the medical teachers. All right, and then view profile page. You can explore one by one. There's a good thing about the Clarivate and the Web of Science group. All right, and they want to see journal citation, because you are so much worried about the citation. So yeah, just view journal citation. Okay, because everything is there. Because sometimes you want to see Q1, Q2, especially for whatever reasons. Okay, medical teachers, and then what will the impact factor? They are calculating that right now. Okay, 3.6, not so bad. And then there's a Q2 journal, but for the education is Q1. Remember, this one is education, but it's a healthcare science is Q2. All right, you can see clearly here. Q1, 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 Q2. All right. So Q1 for the other education, whatever just now, under that category is Q1, and the other Q2. But that's okay, Q1, at least Q1, Q2 in the different disciplines. So this one in the education scientific, yes, Q1, but this one is healthcare science. Oh, it's already Q1. All right. So is already Q1. So that is quite good. This paper, this gender is quite good for you to consider. All right, and you can play around with all the rest of the gender finders. And believe me, if you have no idea at all, just type your scoping review title and put in the abstract the similar information, and usually out of the 6, sometimes you can triangulate which gender is consistently being mentioned or being recommended by the gender finders, and it will save your times a lot. All right. And then gender selection criteria is, you need to see the acceptance rate. They already, usually they put the acceptance rates, time to publication, the visibility in terms of the impact, and then what is the philosophy and ethical issue that they are considering when you are submitting. So there is something that you really need to see. Sometimes, certain gender, you must register your scoping review with certain databases before you can be accepted for submission. So there are certain, but you have to check the general guidelines. Sometimes gender is very particular, particularly scoping review and what other review. And then there's an impact and acceptance. You can, just have your have a kind of reflection. What will the acceptance rates, likely or not likely? What is the impact? So the best is definitely high impact and likely to publish, which is bullseyes. But if you are looking at very unlikely and with a low impact, there is something sinkhole. I think there is a wasting of time. So try to get journal that you think that it will be bullseyes at least. Then you can try one by one until you get it. And don't worry, something gamble also good, because certain journals, the acceptance rate is very low, but it's worthwhile for you to try. But this one, just use sparingly when you are so motivated. Otherwise, go for shorting. Likely but low impact, a little bit, never mind, as long as when we publish, people will read and cite your paper and you are visible because of that impact of your paper to the field. I think that should be okay as well. So whatever it is, discuss with your teams, research team members, where to hit and where to submit your public papers. And my final notes before we go for a Q&A. So what people think success is a luck? No, I don't think so. But basically, it is something what really success is. So we need to be persistent, hard work enough, sacrifice a lot, disciplined, passion, taking risks, and then put our fear and doubt a little bit minimum, and criticize our own works. I think that is something that we really need to to try to develop, so that the success rate will be higher and higher over time. And then my final note, so peer review, I always consider it's a journey. It's no shortcut, as was mentioned by Kamran as well. Yeah, sounds scoping review, but the work and the loads of doing the review process is challenging, definitely. So no shortcut. And planning is the key. I think even for the writing and publishing, you need to plan where to submit, what write, when to when to put things in the correct place, and many other things. I think this is something that you need to consider. And find right journal is very important, so that you are not wasting so much time and not depleting your motivation to submit more papers, especially scoping review papers, to other journal. Right? So once you find right journal, the chances of getting our scoping review papers published is getting higher and right. So you can download my PowerPoint from here. I will share the link afterward in the chat board. And then I think that's all from my side. And definitely myself and Dr. Kamran are very happy to have any any question from all of you. So thank you so much. And I hand over the session to the chairperson.
Thank you so much, Prof. Saiful. So now we have come to the question and answer session, Q&A session. So if you have any questions to ask both of the speakers, you can do it now. or you can write in the chat box, and the presenters will be happy to answer your questions. Just now, I think through the chat box, someone asked about predatory journals. So he asked that whether predatory journals are real threat.
Of course. Predatory journal definitely is a threat. And then be careful with that because one of the main features of predatory journal is they invite you and then they ask you to have a lot of discounts if there is open access, and they promise you to publish your papers within 2 weeks. Even 1 month, even 1 month is quite acceptable, but 2 weeks, they will promise to expedite all the peer review process and so on and so forth. I think with all this work, be careful, guys, because the chances of the journal to be in the predatory is super high. All right, so I think most of you already have that kind of experience, receive invitation to publish in the kind of journal. So be careful with that. It's not good for your health.
Thank you so much for that. So any other questions from the audience?
May I add something? As Prof. Saiful already said that the first indication that the journal is predatory is not an ideal and actual journal, that they approach you actually. They approach you and they can get your data from any of the available websites where if you have submitted any of your article, they lure you with the fast publication with big discounts. And if you're not sure, and there has been some lists available online with various websites, and those guys are doing great job. And lastly, until last 2 years, this list has been updated by Bill's list of potential predatory journals and publishers. So always try to look for these journals. And even if you do not have time and if you are not much adept, much not expert in the field of searching the potential ideal journals, you may ask your colleagues around you. And because if somebody is in the field even for 1 year or 2 years, they would have the names of these predatory journals on their tips. And mostly these journals have got very fancy names, starting with American Journal of blah, 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 Chinese Journal of blah, 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 Pakistan Journal, and they keep the name very fancy. Second thing, if you will see their emails, mostly their emails are from like Gmail, Google, Hotmail, and they will always ask you to submit directly as an email attachment. And they claim that this is the reason they want to give you a very fast acceptance. So these are some indications. But again, I would say that always refer and discuss with your colleagues, with your seniors, and they will tell you, even by reading the email, they would know that this email is not genuine. And it's coming from big countries, and email, the addresses are very big. Sometimes you try to search, you won't find anything there. So always keep yourself safe. And even if you are spending minimum amount, sometimes we think that, okay, otherwise we have to pay like $200, $300, $400. So why not to just pay only $50, $30? But this work of yours, once is in with their hand, later on you cannot just get it back. You cannot publish it anywhere else, because later on, even if you know that the journal was predatory, they have published something, they have sent to you some PDF, you will not be able to submit it to any ideal potential journal, because that work later on would be considered as a plagiarized. So keep in touch with your seniors. I think this is the key to success.
Thank you, Dr. Kamran. Dr. Adam raised his hand. Do you have anything to ask?
Assalamu alaikum, good morning and good afternoon, Dr. Saiful and Dr. Kamran. I am so much happy to see you after a long time not seeing you, both of you. yes, I have one point asking about. Every time I am attending this one with Dr. Saiful, I'm asking the same question. He makes things easy for us, as explaining this one. But once you go for real life situations, systematic review is very difficult. It is not easy. Even if doing, and in the same time to publish it, it is impossible sometimes. Okay, even with Prisma protocol, even if you are yesterday and the day before, wallahi, by chance, I was going back to your previous lectures and PowerPoint. Still, I'm having them with me. Okay, and the 11 checklist we have to do with that one. And another colleague consulted me regarding this one. I told him, no, scoping review, systematic review, I'm not going to participate in that one because it is too much headache. Now, there is your presentation and the reality. There is a gap between. How can reduce this gap? Okay, how can be, the systematic review to be much easier than what we are facing? And thank you for your presentation, lovely one, Dr. Kamran and Dr. Saiful. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair.
Kamran, you like to share how easy is publishing scoping review papers?
I know Brother Adam Khairiyat from my time when I was at USM, and he was the person who made my life so easy being there for 5 months when I got stuck there. He was the guy who used to come to me and cherish me. He was the guy who get me out of my tense times, and really I only can just pray for him for his all success in his life, inshallah. I mean, coming to your opinion, coming to your point, Adam, everything is challenging, but if you have just considered, if you have just concentrated on one of my slides when I said that it is like finding a needle in the haystack, and it's not an easy task. It's an impregnable task to start working on it. But if you have tools, if you have some platforms, some guidance, go dig deep into these platforms. For instance, I'll tell you, till last 2 years, and I have got a humble contribution of publication, more than 60 publication ISI index journals, alhamdulillah. But till last 2 years back, I was not able to know that Mendeley is something that could be helped, that EndNote is something that could be get help from. And while at USM, I learned from my colleagues, my seniors, my supervisors, my team members. And when I learned it, I get to know that the time which I was spending like 2 hours has been cut shortened into 5 minutes. So doing something, having intention is one thing, and going to start working with the right tools and reading the material first. If you want to start doing some scoping review, systematic review, reading is the key. And as Prof. Saiful Bahari already explained to you, there's a big difference in imitation and copying. Once you read again and again on a certain topic, a particular document, later on you'll get to know that, okay, these are stages being done in these 4 or 5 papers. Same way they have done. Same stages, like Axion O'Malley has made our life easy. Levok et al. Has made our life very easy. John Abix Institute has made our life very easy. They provided us this checklist. They say, when you put the title, your title should be like this. When you are doing abstract, your abstract should be like this. When you have inclusion criteria, you have to be like this. Believe me, after reading all these guidelines, and one of my last slides has just projected all these guidelines, and I would like to share happily, as some of the guy has asked in chat box that can my PowerPoint could be also shared. I would like to share it with the moderator so that every student should not be bombarding me with their emails. So I would happily send my PowerPoint to moderator, and this can be taken by anyone to be used. But believe me, these guidelines, that particular last slide, that has got guideline, and that has got framework, that has got stages, stepwise approach. They're telling you what should you do at first step, what you should do at second step. Believe me, after doing this, I was able to publish 3 articles with with the help of and guidance of my senior supervisor, Dr. Saiful Bahari, and my colleagues and my other co-supervisors. Otherwise, in my life, I've never had done any scoping review. And the first thing I told my supervisor, Dr. Saiful Bahari, when I heard, he said to me, Kamran, you have to start working on scoping review. I said, what is scoping review? This is only 2 years back. And today we have got 3 articles published in high impact journals. And now I think the scoping review is far easier than writing a original research article as well. So reading is the key, taking guidance and utilizing the recommendations from the experts in the field, which are available in my slides, and you can take it. And hopefully it will work. Well, you are an extra genius guy. And I know you personally, it won't be a challenge for you, inshallah, biznillah.
جزاك الله خير شيخ والله يعني I am glad with your warm talk, but يعني as we discussed before, it is very challenging, and I faced the same thing. The first time I met Dr. In my PhD, when I started my PhD, I asked Dr. Saiful about what is the potential programs. He asked me about meta-analysis. Then I asked him, what is meta-analysis? This is physics or astronomy? He said, no, this is part of our department job. So it is not always being easy. And as you said, wallahi, I am very thankful to Dr. Saiful. He was my supervisor during my master degree. And he now start to send me some, I came to USM knowing nothing about any articles, how to write or how to read, even what is articles, I don't know. And alhamdulillah, I reached a level that he start to send me some articles to review. Wallahi, I am too much grateful to Dr. Saiful and to USM. But still, we're having the same issue with the publication. Okay, it is not easy as it is sometimes shown on. Please, Dr. Saiful, read your experience in this one.
If I can share with you, I think one is practice, the other one is imitation. Practice and imitation. These are two things that I always use whenever I'm writing a paper, regardless of what kind of whatever type of papers. I will look at what is the best model for me to imitate, and I start practicing according to the model that I already selected. So these are kind of I think because I'm not that genius anyway, that's why I need some model for me to imitate, and based on that imitation, I try to repeatedly practice until I'm comfortable with the way that I'm writing, based on the certain standard that already set according to the model that I choose. Yeah, I think imitate and practice. Imitate and practice. That is a simple things, and definitely there's it's easy to say imitate and practice, but the consistency and commitment to imitate and practice is super important. Yeah, I think that is the only way that we can improve our writing, because writing is a skill. No matter how good your language, but if you don't practice writing, it won't go anywhere. So remember, writing is a skill. Imitation and practice must be together. All right. So I think that is my humble sharing on top of whatever Kamran has mentioned just now. I think the more you do, the better you are. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Saiful. Jazakallah khairan.
Adam, I would just add very small comment after this explicit and the great explanation given to you by our senior professor, Dr. Saiful. Make a group, make a small club. Like we have a group of our PhD candidates that has been facilitated by our senior supervisor, Dr. Saiful Bahari. And once you have the group of people who are in common interest of and who are enthusiasts, who are dedicated, want to work together, because it's a teamwork, number one. And even somebody is having intention not to do scoping review, or probably he's to something else, he's working to some other aspects of research, at least you will have 1 hour, 2 hour every day to chat with one another and discuss with each other. It really helps a lot. Sometimes I miss some article that I haven't read, or sometimes I read some article but I could not get the extract out of that article. And one of my colleagues would tell me that thing in very simple words. So once we listen to someone else, we sometimes understand more. Sometimes we discuss, we tell something to somebody else. It's learning for us as well. It's an ongoing journey. So learning, sharing, and all these things would definitely help, inshallah.
One more question. I use media in practice, but I worry that turn it in way that we say plagiarize. Plagiarize is basically you are copying everything from the papers. We are not copying, but actually we are looking at the way the papers are presenting the data, the point of views, the way put their argument. So that is something that we imitate their styles in terms of constructing the whole argument. But no, do not copy and paste. It's totally different from copy and paste and imitation. I think that must be clearly put in our mind. Copy and paste is always not good. By imitation, learning from the model that we already choose as a good model for us to follow, that will be that will be acceptable and less likely to go for plagiarism. Yeah, I think that is something that we need to be clear from the beginning. We are not copy and paste. We are just imitating the model that we choose as a part of our journey to write something so that it can improve ourselves from time to time whenever we practice again and again. Yeah. All right. There is another question was mentioned, what is different between scoping and systematic review? Yeah, definitely. Scoping review, you have certain framework. Systematic review have certain framework. So I think in terms of the framework and the steps, it will be different, but there are certain overlapping between the. Yeah, and then in terms of robustness, systematic review has, I think, more robust because you are looking at the facts and then the effectiveness of certain things that you are interested to to research or maybe based on the available evidence. But scoping review is only specific to certain area, and then we are not looking at the effectiveness, but we have some idea what would be kind of effectiveness happening in that particular setting. It's not all, but it's kind of have a map or a glimpse to the effectiveness that you are looking before we proceed to a proper systematic review to dig out the whole available literature related to the topic of interest. Yeah, I think the depth will be more in systematic review. The robustness, yes, there are more steps in systematic review as compared to scoping review. What happened to narrative review? Narrative review usually there is no systematic way. You just mentioned that which database, what the keywords, but it's not something that have a certain guideline just like scoping and no systematic review. It's a kind of experts review on literature because guided by certain keyword for searching, but based on experience of the expert as well in selecting the relevant articles or evidence in the literature, and they put it in a way that is easy for other people to understand about the whole concept or the whole views of that particular topics. Yeah, usually narrative review will be something, I would say that as a kind of experts reviews on certain area. Yeah, usually done by expert. Scoping review less critical. Yes, I think not less critical, but I think less in terms of the merit of the finding, because you cannot be absolute with your finding with the scoping review. It's just a suggestions that there is something happening in this area based on the scoping review. But if you want to be absolute, go for systematic review, because the review will and I will go through all the available relevant articles without miss in that particular field of area. Yeah, I think in terms of less critical, both critical because it's helping and complement each other, but in terms of the impact to make decision, okay, there will be more towards systematic review as compared to scoping review. (2018) and submit for publication in 2022 or 23. Is it valid and possible? I think okay, there is something that the limit. I would say that I don't know whether it's limitation or disadvantage. Usually, scoping review, you want to publish as soon as possible, not too long. If let's say you already reviewed in 2018 and then submit publication in 2022, 2023, it's about 4 to 5 years. That is a bit challenging because the reviewer said that is there any other latest edition, and sometimes they will ask you to add on. I mean that you need to repeat the same process from 2019 to 2022 at least, you know, just in case you are missing certain important art papers, you know, maybe articles, because of the time that you search was 5 years ago as compared to when you are submitting. I think this is something that the disadvantage of scoping review because you need to make it fast in terms of publication. Yeah. Should scoping review include the ongoing research project? Yes, why not? Even ongoing, because there are certain things that you like to, you know, like to scope in detail, then I think, yes, it is possible. When you find something that is very interesting for you to scope in within certain limited no duration. Why not? That's okay, if there is a need. How many years papers should be included for scoping review and can... Okay, usually scoping review is, you know, we're trying to keep into something that is not too long like a safety review. We are not covering all. Let's say scoping review is giving ideas about what's happening in the short duration. For example, let's say 5 to 10 years, you know, depending on the field that you are, that you are involved. For example, let's say if let's say in genetic, definitely genetic is so fast, super fast in terms of the advancement in terms of literature. I mean that you want to see for the past 5 years, what would be the area look like, you know, scoping review, 5 years. But if let's say the thing is a new area, then it is something that has been developing, then maybe you can get some idea about from the beginning. For example, let's say the area is started in 2015, for example. And until now, there's not so much evidence and nobody has yet come up with a specific review whatsoever. Then you want to have an idea what would be the things happening in that area within the 10 years ago, then you put as 10 years ago because it's a new area and there's not so much research, but you want to know what's happening and what will be the potential gaps in that area within that short duration of time. So I think that is something that we would like to see because it's a very new things that has not been established at this moment yet. But if let's say it's established, then you decided, for example, let's say, oh, there is a lot of things happening here. Why not go for systematic review? Then systematic review is much more thorough and intense in terms of finding and searching for all possible literature that has been published for example, from the beginning until now, because you want to make decision from systematic review. And a lot of guideline and many other important guideline, based on the systematic review as well as meta-analysis after that. All right, so I think Kamran already mentioned in one of his slides, I think, the 4 things just now. And then the plus, scoping review or not. Remember the formula that was given by Dr. Kamran. All right.
Yeah, doctor.
Yeah.
The thing is, actually, you see, the question of like, is it obsolete or not? Nothing is obsolete actually. So sometimes new things emerges and new ways emerging, and if you read the literature, you will find somewhere that's written that the first paper was written for scoping review. That was in 2005. But at the same time, when I searched more literature, I found that 1997 was the year when the first scoping review was came into place. The thing is how fast it is going. So it's not that if scoping review has been just in place, so they have made obsolete the other forms of knowledge synthesis. It depends what you want to do actually and what you are required to do. While you are just pursuing your PhD or masters, and if you think that the scoping review is the right thing to add up for your work to make it more robust, you have to go for it. If you think that a systematic review has to be there, you have to do it. There are prognostic reviews, there are rapid reviews, there are narrative reviews, umbrella reviews, whatever you want to do. Everything has got its own importance. The papers related with umbrella reviews, rapid reviews, prognostic reviews, diagnostic, all these things are being published. It's not only that if we are hearing these days some name that is scoping review, so we all should just run after it. No, make your choice, think what you need, and if it is a very broader kind of heterogeneous nature for the topic you are trying to explore, and whatever review type you are doing, but first you have to check if in past somebody has done it or not. There was one question in the chat that somebody asked that it's been done long years ago and now you want to publish. So once you will send it to any journal, the first comment from the journal would come that you had done your search strategy in that particular duration 3 years back. In these 3-4 years, the multiple papers might have emerged and the things might have changed, or probably somebody already have addressed the research question. That particular research question that you have opted 4 years back might have been addressed by somebody else. So I will not say clear no for you to try to start effort to send that particular scoping review for publication, but do some homework before so that you don't lose your time. Sometimes you send this paper to any journal, at least the journal will take 4 or 5 months, and after 4 or 5 months, if you get disappointed, God forbid, so your 4 or 5 months would go into vain. So before submitting that particular paper, do some homework, try to find this protocol related with that particular questions, that research question that you have worked on. And if you think that nothing has been done, or you can add up on some more strategy, some more years you can include in that strategy, patch up, and then your paper would be again like a latest one. So don't throw it in the dustbin. Still, you can just try to make use of it. This is my personal opinion.
Thank you so much, to Dr. Kamran. So if there's no more questions, then we are coming to the end of the session. Approach Saiful and Dr. Kamran. Some of the participants asked for the recorded version of this session. So I'd like to ask your permission whether it's okay for us to upload it into our school's YouTube channel. Is it okay with both of you?
No problem.
Okay,
No problem.
thank you very much.
Pleasure.
So, thank you. So before we end, I'd like to say thank you to both of the speakers here to share with us your expertise in writing as well as publishing scoping review papers. Okay, so thank you. All right, so thank you also to all of the participants. And again, goodbye and thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you so much. And when you share this on YouTube channel, just do send us a link as well, so that we can improve our weaknesses for the next upcoming seminars. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Bye
All right,
bye.
thank you so much. Bye.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.